Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session, which is Intuitive Project Management Training for Everybody. Please join me in welcoming our presenters, Zach, Herman, and Nicole May. Zach serves as the PMO manager and Nicole May as the PMO director for UC San Diego Health. Zach and Nicole have spent the last 3 years at UC San Diego Health starting and transforming the IS project management practice and have collaborated closely with UCLA and UCOP to bring the U-Plan project portfolio management tool to UC San Diego and several other UC campuses. Together, they have trained over 1,000 people on project management light methodology. So let's give a warm welcome to Zach and Nicole. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right. I think we're ready to share. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah, looks good.
All right. Nicole, you're up.
All right. Welcome. So today we're presenting an abbreviated version of this training. Again, we've trained quite a few people on this, and even some high schoolers and middle schoolers have taken this course. So we're excited to bring it to you today. If you'd like to have like a more in-depth version, there's actually like a 4-hour version of this course, and it has case studies and it's very interactive, and we'll just give you a deeper understanding of the methodology. But we want to give you an overview so you can get a taste for it. We do know that even the middle schoolers can manage projects coming right out of this course, and you can too. And so if this is your first intro to project management, this is a great one. If you're totally like embedded in project management and that's your career and everything, we still think there's something here for you, just about kind of simplifying the body of knowledge and really applying kind of the surgical approach to project management. That's really great for, low complexity or medium complexity projects. Of course, you want to use the entire body of knowledge, likely, and more of your toolkit when you're getting into something that's very complex and large. But this is great for those types of projects. So let's go to the next slide. So the objectives of this course are really to understand fundamental concepts in project management and really understand the language. We want to make sure that everyone coming out of this course has standard tools and processes for managing. So basically, we want everyone on the same page when we're leading projects, and those who are leading projects, so that we can all, again, speak the same language and then have the same processes and tools and know what to expect. And we would love to share this small but effective kind of surgical toolkit with you after this presentation. All right. So we tell our participants that what you'll gain from this training is personal satisfaction and confidence. That's a tall statement there, but what we're really trying to say is that sometimes project management can be daunting, right? And a little overwhelming. And the practice of project management, the career of project management, the body of knowledge of project management that's used worldwide sometimes can feel a little bit over-engineered, right? And where do I start? And how do I use all these processes and templates? And how do I understand this lingo? Forget all that. We want you to come out of this course knowing for sure I can do this and have the confidence to go for it. We also want you to know that Zach and I, we're part of the UCSD community. We're right here. If you have questions or you want to see the larger training or you want to take this to other team members, we're more than happy to work with you. We want to make sure you have support, and we want to make sure that we can clarify anything for you also after this training if you still have questions. All right. So Zach's going to do the second part of this intro, which is the fundamentals.
Yes. So let's start with our project management fundamentals. And one thing we really like to touch on is the difference between project work and operational work. And we collectively at the UC system, this is a little bit of a tricky topic sometimes because we all work within the system. It's a little bit easier to kind of separate these two when you're a vendor or you're working outside because you're the vendor, you're being brought in, you're doing a project, and you're kind of you're taking off afterwards. When you're within your own system, though, you a lot of the times are not only doing the project work, but then you're also picking up that operational work that comes out of the project work. So we like to really outline the difference between the two. So project work, a project by definition is temporary. It has a start and it has a finish date. We know at the end of this, the end date, we're going to close this thing out and we're going to move on. It's unique. It's always different. Oops. You can do similar types of projects. Projects can always be similar in nature. On the health side, we work with a system called Epic, and our Epic updates are very similar most of the times that we do them, but each time we do them, they're slightly different. There's different aspects of it. There's different training components, things like that. And then the goal of a project is we're reaching some sort of an objective, and then we're transitioning that off to a team or a person or a group of people that are doing the support of that long term. And this is where, again, it gets a little bit gray depending on the organization you work for, because you could be reaching that goal and transitioning it off to yourself. Like, I could be an analyst working on a project. I'm also leading the project. And after the project, I'm going to then manage the operational aspects of it long term. Operational work is ongoing. It's repetitive. It's the things we do on a day-to-day basis. Our purpose here is to really keep the lights on, to sustain the business. An example I can probably give from the health side is, say I'm a nurse and I'm working on a particular unit. My day-to-day job is to provide care for that unit. However, I could also be tapped to then work on a project. Maybe I'm rolling out a project where I'm rolling out pressure ulcer sensors that detect when patients need to be, flipped over. That's a project. There's going to be an end of that project. At the end of that project, somebody's going to pick that up and maintain and support the ongoing maintenance of it. And that could also be me in this case. But that ongoing operational maintenance work would be the operational work. The actual implementation of the sensors would be the project work. All right. I see. So let's see. Okay. All right. So we are going to talk about these process groups in this training. We'll walk through them a little bit more in detail. I'm not going to take a ton of time going into the weeds here on this slide because we're going to do it through the training. The one thing, though, to note is these are formal process groups. If you look into project management as a practice or a career, these are the formal processes that you will study in the manual for project management called the PMBOK. So again, we have initiation, and that's starting us off. Our planning phase, where you're really mapping out what you're going to do. Execution is actually the build. You're doing what you have said you are planning on doing. Monitoring and controlling is where we're kind of keeping an eye on things. We're keeping our finger on the pulse of the health of the project. And we couple this with execution because they really go hand in hand. And as a project manager, it really ramps up in execution. And then closing is where you can, wrap the project up and move on to the next one. We also talk about a sixth phase, phase 0, that we call ideation and discovery. It's very big here at in the UC system. We've trained multiple UC campuses, and they all do very similar practices when it comes to ideation and discovery. We don't spend a ton of time talking about ideation and discovery, but we do think it's important for us to just know what it is. And then we highlight planning and monitoring and controlling because as a project manager, these are the two most important phases for project managers to kind of make sure that we have a good grasp on. So some more just the idea of project management, what we're trying to do. And that brings us to our iron triangle. It's also referred to as the triple constraints. And in project management, your focus is to maintain the balance of this triangle. This triangle being your time, which is your schedule, your cost, which is your budget, and then your scope, which is what we're going to do, what we're setting out to do. by keeping the balance of this triangle, you're ensuring that you're producing a quality product at the end of it. You can probably imagine that if you're moving along on a project, you're about 2 months away from being done, and someone says, hey, we need to add, A, B, and C to this project. Well, you can imagine the bottom of this triangle is going to extend out. It's going to extend out. And if we don't adjust time and or cost, you're going to have a skewed triangle, and therefore the quality is going to be skewed. So we know as project managers to maintain that balance, that if the scope is expanding, we're likely going to have to add either resources, we're going to have to add some sort of a budgetary add, maybe we purchase service from someone, maybe we, purchase or contract with a vendor to come in. We're adding, in addition to scope, we're adding either time to that schedule or we're adding budget to the project in order to make sure that our quality isn't skewed at the end of it. And then what is a project manager? Everything right now in the environment out there, in the work environment, is projectized. When you are projectized, it allows you to do more with less. So we look to chunk things off and turn them into projects. So project manager gets thrown around a lot in the industry, a lot out there. Project manager can mean different things to different companies, different things to different people. But what is an actual project manager? Project manager is that person that's responsible for leading the project from its beginning to its close. They're responsible for the planning, the execution, the management of the people, our time, our budget, and the scope. All of those phases that we saw a couple slides ago, we are responsible for as project managers. We are responsible for having the discipline to create attainable and achievable project objectives. So this is important because a lot of times as a project manager, you could be provided a project and it's just not realistic. We're never going to achieve this goal. And the outcome may not change. We may have to go for it. But as a project manager, you need to at least raise the red flag. Hey, I know we want to get this done in a month. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily, it's not possible. It's physically not possible. Here's why it's not possible. Here are the options of what we can do. Whether that's accepted or not is one thing, but we as project managers have to at least raise the flag and let them know. We are the first point of contact on our communication. And we highlight communication because it is so vitally important to being a successful project manager. We are the central hub, or the air traffic controllers, if you think of it that way, where we're kind of helping pull pieces together and message out and making sure everyone is on the same page, knowing what's going on, knowing where there's stumbling blocks, knowing where we need help. And lastly, we strive to foster positive team dynamics. So what this means is, we don't all, as project team members, have to be best friends. We don't have to go out to happy hour. We don't have to, even be friendly outside of the project, but we have to have at least a positive team dynamic where we can move a project forward and collaborate appropriately together. Nicole and I have seen, not here, project teams where they can't even be in the same room with each other. And that's a real kind of miscue or a failure almost from a project manager perspective, because it's our responsibility to make sure your project teams are effectively moving forward together and collaborating together, even if we're not all friends. And that brings us to the art and science of project management. In project management, you have a ton of accountability and virtually no authority over the people that are on your project team. I don't want to say it's easier, but it's a different dynamic when you are leading a project that you actually, you have direct reports on your own team that are working on that project that report to you. There's a little bit of a different dynamic there, but when you're working on projects, which is the majority of the time, you don't have that sort of authority over the resources that are working on it. To put it bluntly, you can't discipline people. There's no thought in their mind that if they don't do what we need to do on this project, they're going to be disciplined for it without some sort of an escalation. That's a tricky and a difficult dynamic to manage. And that leads us to our art and science. The science, which is really what this training is geared around, is our metrics, our processes, our templates. It's the playbook, the step-by-step, this is how we do things. The art is not something we can teach. Definitely can't teach the art side of project management in an hour. We can't even really teach the art side of the project management in our, our 4-hour training. The art of project management takes a long, long time. This is not easy. I started in project management very young, and I was awful at the art side of it. I'm still blunt, but was super blunt. It was very much, kind of not literally, but hitting people in the nose with like, this is what we need to get done. And that's not great. It's not a great way to manage projects. So the art takes time. It takes refinement. And the only way you can really refine your art over time is if you have a solid process in place. If you have that science leg in place, you can use that to feed into your art. So I know that if I'm tracking a project schedule, for example, I know where people are maybe consistently, running late on certain tasks. That allows me to kind of go to them, offline, not in front of anybody, not calling them out, and say, hey, what's going on? Let's use some influence. Let's use my gut feelings to say, they've been late on 4 tasks before. They're probably going to be late on this 5th task. Maybe I should get out ahead of it. Maybe I should go approach them and find out if there's something I can do to help remove any barriers that they may be running into. So these areas feed into each other. The art and the science, they need each other. If you're going to be an effective project manager over time, you need both the art and the science. They feed into each other. All right, so here's the toolkit. Here's what we're going to look at through this training. And the important piece to note for project managers is that we need to make sure that these are maintained and retained throughout the project. So you want to make sure that you don't just document to document and then throw it out. You want to make sure that your documentation's there, you're going back to it as you need to throughout the project, and then you're also keeping it, you're retaining it. We have been asked this a lot. There is no standard time to retain documentation. It's really dependent on the company that you work for. Some companies want you to retain stuff for 10 years. Some don't care. Some are like, keep it for a couple months and you're good to go. So really, it really depends on the company that you work for. So we're going to start off with ideation and discovery. And again, we're not going to spend too much time on it, but I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, and she's going to talk about this phase. So Nicole, it's all you.
Sure thing. So this is the part of the presentation where we typically do case studies, and it's very interactive, and we go into major depth in terms of like how to use this toolkit that we have. I just want to say that we know we only have until 1 o'clock today. Again, we offer this training online, and we can definitely in your departments do this training more extensively, but I just want you to know that we're going to kind of overview the rest of this this piece of the presentation where we really go in detail on the toolkit. But so let me start with ideation and discovery. And this is, again, something that that everyone does, but everybody does uniquely, depending on your organization, your department, the needs of your strategic planning process. But this is basically what it is. You can go to the next slide, Doug. I like to call it how a bill becomes a law. So you have an idea and you go through a bunch of iteration and discovery. You might use Six Sigma, lean tactics. You might be using design thinking. You might be involving an RFP process. There's all sorts of things that come into how an idea becomes an actual project. So once it's gone through that middle piece, that committee, you get to a point where you're ready to go and you're ready to initiate the project. You have something fully scoped and ready to go. So that's the process of ideation and the philosophy around it. And let's go to the next slide. Yep. So once you have your idea and it's projectized, then you can go into initiation. You don't want to come into initiation still doing that discovery, because it's going to slow down your project and you might not even feel like you have the authority to proceed at that point, right? So by the time you get to initiating a project, this is clearly what we're going to do. you have authority to proceed, and you're starting to gather the team together. So the first phase in initiation, what we'd like to teach for the toolkit is this is the only thing you need, is this A3 charter. We like to use best practice from all places and all types of methodologies. So the A3 is really a Lean Six Sigma term. We use the A3 proposal as our charter. And what I like to say is the charter is a contract. So it's the document you use to sketch out your project, explain what you're going to do. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have every single last detail. That's part of what we do later, which is planning. But it's enough information where you can communicate to the organization, this is the scope of this project. Here's who's working on it. Here's the budget. And you get that authority, again, to move to the next step. Again, it's a contract. So between the project manager and the resources working on it and the sponsor or business sponsor or executive that's kind of overseeing the work. This sets you up for success. If you go into the project having a really great charter and having that authority to proceed, you know that you can move on to the next step. You know that everybody knows what you're doing. And again, that comes back to the key piece of project management, which is communicating and having that transparency. So the next slide, please. Yep, and I just kind of went through this. So the other thing about the charter is it's something to be kept and returned to. So in formal project management, when we look at kind of more complex projects, we actually may have longer charters. We may have very extensive project plans, but in Project Management Lite, we pivot off this tool. Your project charter can become the foundation of your plan, and maybe it's all you need to run a minimally complex project. So let's go on. All right, and here's the charter that we use in UCSD Health for IS projects, and it's actually been adopted by other areas as well. I just want to overview quickly what this is all about. So we think everything on this charter is very important to do. We don't want anyone to skip any of these boxes because it really does help your thinking around what this project is all about. So we start at the top column, which is the top left, which is the current situation. So, and this can be as simple as when we teach this course, we have a case study around taking a family vacation. It can be as simple as we're all exhausted from coronavirus and this family needs a vacation. Everything's opened up. We're going to go. That's the current situation. The description of the proposed solution and its key impacts. This is where you get into a little more detail about what we're doing, right? We're going to take a road trip. We're going to go in an RV and some key impacts about what that means for the organization, right? Or the family in that example. Next is evaluation of alternatives. We want to know in our organization, have you exhausted all the possibilities before you spend money, put resources on this project? Have you looked at everything else, right? Is this the right solution? And this kind of goes back and it points back and links to your discovery process. How in your discovery did you come up with this particular one? And this is also protecting you, right? So for, we don't want something to come in from outer space later, like, oh, there's this other vendor that does this and they will do the full implementation and it's way cheaper and faster and actually the product is better. Like, we don't want to know that once we already started the project. We want to make sure that that is something that has been evaluated and we really did make the best decision up front. The next piece of this column is the in-scope and out-of-scope considerations. So again, this is where the project management is really, really protecting the project, right? So, and also protecting that iron triangle right up front. This is what we're going to do, and let's explicitly explain what we're not going to do, right? What I see a lot, this is kind of where projects kind of get off the rails a little bit, is when you keep adding more and more scope, right? Oh, this is, this vendor is offering this extra thing. It's not, well, let's just do that. And then you kind of get down these rabbit holes where it wasn't scoped at the beginning. It's taking more time and more resources. And even if it's not taking more budget, time is so valuable around here, right? So if you're having people working on something that's out of scope and you didn't explain that as part of the project up front, you really are not having that fiduciary duty or that stewardship of the resources that we have in the organization, right? So we really want to outline what's in scope and out of scope. Going to the next column at the upper right, known issues, risks, and dependencies. Again, protect the project, right? Like if you know something might derail this project up front, call it out, right? Call it out right at the beginning, because one, you can address it. Two, you can let everybody know that you thought of it, right? And even if you don't have a solution, you're monitoring it and everybody's aware, right? So, hey, we're building something in Houston in September. Huge risk for flooding. That could be something that comes up. When I was working in Houston, every time we did a building project, that was a huge concern of ours and something we tried to mitigate, right? So we knew that was an issue or a risk, or actually a risk up front, and we wanted to call it out. The other thing you want to call it here are dependencies. What needs to happen before this project happens, before we initiate, so that the project can actually be successful, right? So you might have to do some process improvement and create a working system before you layer maybe a piece of technology on it, all right? So that process improvement and that workflow needs to be developed before you can actually put this system in, right? And so you want to call that dependency out and maybe even spin up a separate project around that specific area of focus before this one happens. Next are people and resource requirements, high level in a charter. And this is where I come back to, your charter becomes your project plan later in Project Management Lite. You may not know the name of the person that's going to work on this project or the level of effort down to the hours that a person is going to work on this project, but you may know that you're going to need a financial analyst to be part of this work. You may know that you need a training resource at the end of the project to ensure that everybody knows how to use it. So you can list at least the role. You can put it like a t-shirt, we call it t-shirt size, small, medium, large effort, right? We know it's really small. We're not going to really need the analyst for very long, maybe just 8 hours. You don't really know, but you know that it's not a ton of work. Put the level of effort in, and you want the team manager. You want to be able to go back to the manager when you're putting this charter together and say, hey, I think I'm going to need this resource. What do you think about that? So you're putting this communication and this transparency right up front in your charter. Next is a schedule. This can be high level. It can be start the project, build, test, train, go live. Major deliverables. It doesn't have to be down to the detail of how those things are done, but enough where you can sketch out, this is the beginning and the end of this project, and here's some things that have to happen that we're going to celebrate along the way, these milestones. And so you would put the deliverable, the due date, and who's responsible ultimately for that? Who's responsible for the training? There's probably a director or manager who's responsible for that effort. Make sure it's right up front, because those are the people you're going to want on your project team, right? And then most importantly to me, and another area that's often overlooked, is the measurement of success. And for me, this goes right along with the scope of the project, right? Your measure of success really says, did we deliver the quality product? Did we complete the work and the scope that we said we were going to do? You got to know how to measure that, right? So for example, Zach was mentioning a nursing project we had before, which was putting in this device that detected when a patient needed to be turned so that we could avoid pressure ulcers. That group ran a pilot to see if this device was going to work. And they said, we're going to reduce pressure ulcers by some percentage. I think it was maybe 12%. They came out of that project and that pilot and blew that success metric out of the water. They reduced pressure ulcers by like 30%. It was enough to actually feed into our quality metrics and make a meaningful impact, right? And so that we knew it was successful. The pilot was successful, and guess what? We knew that, and so that project got approval to proceed even further and go throughout our organization. So success metrics are important. And setting those up, if you've heard the term SMART goals from other methodologies, that's exactly what those are. Lastly is signature and funding. Again, your charter is a contract. And whoever your customer is, your sponsor, these are the terms we use, customer and IS director. You want those folks to say, I agree with this. Everything you've put on this page makes sense. Here's your authority to proceed. This is the contract they're going to sign on the line. And this is also very important too, because now you've outlined your escalation path. Your business sponsor, your customer, maybe your director have said, this is what we're going to do. And if things get out of whack, or you need more budget, or resources are not available, or something is going on and you need to bring something to their attention, you now have the escalation point right here lined out. Lastly, in Project Management Light, we don't teach about budgeting, which is a very important thing in project management, but we don't want everyone to kind of get involved in that level of detail. If you're managing a really not complex or medium complexity project, sometimes it's really not about budget, it's more about time and resources. So we spend our time teaching that. We do want to know in our PMO if something does require budget, because it's an indication for us that we might need to help out or provide a different level of support, or maybe even provide that budget training for the person who's managing this project so that they can be successful. That's a charter in a nutshell. And again, in our other training, we do walk through a case study, which elaborates that even further. So really, you can see why it's important to have each of those pieces in there. Okay, so that's the major tool for initiating a project. And you're done with initiation in Project Management Light when this charter is approved, the contract is signed. You've met with your sponsor, you've established a few more things. Here's how I'm going to manage this project in terms of this is when we're going to meet. Do you agree with that? Hey, I have listed all these roles. I'm going to start choosing some people to be part of the project planning. And usually it's the folks that are listed right there in your charter, right? So you're establishing your approach. You're starting to gather the people necessary, your trusted advisors or other people that are working on the project to be part of the planning process. And you're also going to determine, when are we going to start planning? Sometimes you have a charter approved. You did all the discovery, you got a charter, but your project's not actually going to start for a few months, right? And so you're kind of going to, at this stage, determine, when are we going to kick off? When are we going to do that planning? It might not be right away. It might be somewhere down the road, okay? So those are all the things that you're going to do to wrap up this phase and move on to the next phase. I'm going to keep talking, even though I'm losing my voice. Planning. All right. As we said, as Zach said earlier, planning is the most important process, in my opinion, for the project manager. You know, this is your responsibility to make sure that this project is so well thought out that it's going to go smoothly, or as smoothly as you can predict. And a lot of times, especially in our area in IT, we have brilliant folks, and a lot of them are very action oriented, right? They're engineers, they want to build something. The planning is not exciting, right? It's this road, this bump you have to get through to get to the cool part, which is like building something great and testing it and like innovating, trying something out. So it's the job of the project manager to kind of bring it back to reality and say, let's look at this, let's plan it out first, so that when you do get to the engineering part, you can be successful. You can be more successful than had you not started planning. The last thing we want is for engineers to start down a path that isn't going to work or is going to cause issues. We don't want that for them. So it's the job of the project manager to kind of pause and do this planning work. All right. The most important part of planning in Project Management Light is creating a schedule. And a schedule is like a loaded term, and it's kind of wonky. So really what this is it's your activity list. That's how I say it. It lists those milestones that you had in your charter, and it goes one level deeper, which is all the activities required to get those milestones done. The schedule not only puts those activities in a list, what makes it special and more than just a list is that you're putting a start and an end date, and you're assigning people to those tasks. That's the full schedule, right? The schedule can be elaborated upon. Sometimes folks get kind of tied up in this process, like, I don't know everything that we need to do, or or they want to get down to this very level, much more detail than is required for the schedule for the project to get started. So there's a little bit of an art here in knowing where to start and finish the schedule. You can progressively elaborate on this. Your project management doesn't have to be static. You don't have to know every single detail up front. You can come back as you know more things about your project, and as things change, go back and elaborate on your schedule, okay? But once your schedule is what we call baselined, which is we think we've got a full list of the activities to the best of our knowledge, the dates, the people locked in who are going to do this. We call it baselining. Okay, you at some point you do have to stop the planning process and say, all right, this is what we're going to do. It doesn't mean you can't come back and change it. That's why you have those escalation paths. That's why you have your sponsors. That's why you keep managing the project over time. You can come back and change things, but it just means that after you're baselined, it requires approval to do that, right? You've locked in your schedule, your scope. All right. Again, this is a complicated topic. We think it's really important. When we do our project management light training as a whole, we spend a lot of time, a disproportionate amount of time on this, but I just want to overview what the schedule looks like. So basically we start with what we call work breakdown structure, and you can almost imagine the Post-it notes on the wall where you're at the top level outlining your milestones and then dropping activities underneath that. Once you finish your work breakdown structure, you start adding people and time to that. And then you put them in sequence, what we call a sequenced work breakdown structure, or in project management wonky terms, a network diagram with a critical path. All right, and then the last thing you do is create a resource loaded baseline schedule. And Zach, I think I'm going to not hurry through, but just kind of clip through the next slides a little bit because I don't want to run out of time at the end. But just for this group, this is what the work breakdown structure may look like. This is building a house. You can see at the top line, you have the deliverables, what we call work packages. You're going to design the house. There's structural, there's utilities, there's finishing. One level below that, in each of those categories, you're thinking about what, all of the milestones that need to happen. So if you're finishing a house, there's painting, windows, roofing, siding, landscaping, right? So you're going to list those out in your project schedule. And you want to go one level deeper. You might say, hey, in landscaping, that's more than just finishing landscaping. I need somebody to put down sod. I need somebody to plant trees. I need somebody to edge where my garden is going to go, right? Those are all part of landscaping. So you might go one level deeper. Okay, so that's the work breakdown structure. And then we take that straight, after some massaging and thinking and putting things together, then you're able to build that schedule, which starts with your simple activity list and has your time and your resources attached. All right. The other thing we want in project management light, besides a schedule for you to think about, is your communication plan. Coming back to how important this is. Just a simple, thought out process around how you're going to communicate can do a world of good for your project. So we like you to think about all of your communication vehicles. This is the thing that needs to be communicated. This is who needs to be told and when, and here's who's going to deliver it, and this is the data delivery. This communication plan, we always want you to check with your customer and your sponsor because they really do know the audience better than probably the project team does. And they're going to give you the gems, right? Like the feedback on this vehicle won't work or you forgot this group. In any case, we always say this is an important piece of this puzzle. The last thing you want to do is implement a project and nobody knows what it is and it changed their process and now everybody's up in arms. Again, this aids the transparency. The other thing that can be part of your communication plan is actually your internal team communication. How often are we going to meet? How am I going to update my sponsor? Am I going to use a dashboard? Am I going to meet with my sponsor? Those things actually within the internal project can be put on this plan as well. All right, next slide. All right, planning is complete when you've got your schedule. You've requested all the resources that are going to work on the project, everybody you listed on your schedule. You've updated everything. Hey, when you were putting things together and planning, you might need to go back and update your charter a little bit. You may have discovered something that needs to be updated. So you might need to get reapproval of that. You might need to revise it. You may need to add members of the team that you didn't know about before and onboard them into the project, get them up to speed, right? So you've got all that built. And then you have a kickoff meeting. That's the official, hey, here's everything we're doing. You want the whole team to know, here's the plan. They agree upon the plan and we progress. We call that a phase gate review with your customer when you actually review the plan and get authorization to start executing. We do want your sponsor to know and say, you're good. This plan made sense. I'm totally on board. Now you can start doing that engineering work and go ahead. We really want you to pause for a second and do a phase gate review and really tell your customer what you're doing. All right, so that's planning. And I'm going to turn it over to Zach now to take it away.
All right, so yeah, so that's planning. And then that brings us into our third and fourth phases, which we teach together: execution and then monitoring and controlling. So in these phases that we teach, we really want to focus on our status reports and our meetings, and then our risks, issues, and changes. So for project managers, our status report is incredibly important. You know, this is how we give a snapshot of what the project is like, what the health of our project is at a given point in time of that project. It is incredibly important that we release these regularly as well. Typically, they should be released weekly. If you have a lot going on, it's a lot of teams, bunch of movement, weekly is good. It keeps people in the loop. They know consistently, I'm going to get my report on a Friday. They're ready for it. What you don't like to see is, 1 week a report goes out on a Tuesday, the next week the report goes out on a Friday. One week it just skipped altogether, and then we go out like 3 weeks out from there. We really want to make sure this is regular. So if it's not weekly, bi-weekly or every other week is okay. Sometimes what I've seen that works well is if a project is ramping up, it's not quite at that point where things are just really, firing on all cylinders. We see people do, a bi-weekly report for maybe a month and then switch over to a weekly report. Don't recommend flipping in between, so people are guessing, and also recommend you make that announce it. We're switching from bi-weekly to weekly, and that's how it's going to be for the rest of the project. So just make sure your customers, your stakeholders know when to expect this. The other important item to note here is that we need to be honest and transparent about our status. We're never going to be able to get past issues or risks if we don't know that they exist. So if a project is not green, if we're not on track, if we are in trouble, we need to say it as project managers. And this is where kind of you do need to use some art, but your science can very methodically allow you to say, we're a little bit at risk. Here's why. I'm going to look at my schedule. We're a couple tasks behind. Here's our plan on how we're going to get past them. But at this point in time, we are yellow. It's not like things are going to be okay. We're going to get past it. We're going to catch up. But here's why we're yellow. And here's what we're going to do about it. But we need to be honest about it. Hiding things only leads to trouble. All right. Meeting minutes and agendas, they allow us, sometimes we can review these status reports in there, but meeting minutes and agenda are huge in making sure that you have the appropriate people on the meetings that you need to get things done. In the longer training, I like to, this slide is probably a 20-minute slide because meetings and minutes are huge. And meetings in particular are always a hot button topic. And especially in the UC system, there are tons of meetings, I should say. We can all probably relate to the fact that we're on meetings all day, every day. And that's normal for a project manager. So what this slide is all about is making sure that the people that are attending your meetings know why they're there. The worst thing in the world is when you get on a meeting and somebody, like the first thing someone says is, can somebody tell me why we're at this meeting? We don't want that. So in order to get past that, make sure that doesn't happen, is we need to make sure we're sending out agendas, giving a clear agenda and objective of why we're meeting and what we're trying to accomplish. Because you could have attendees at this meeting that aren't just, the project manager and the project team. Maybe it's other stakeholders, maybe it's executive sponsorship. You could really have people from all over your organizations at these meetings. So you really do need to make sure they know why they're at that meeting. Agendas and minutes should always be retained and archived. Often you will get to the end of a project and someone will say, well, why did we do that? Or why did we agree on this? If you don't have those agendas and minutes retained, it's going to be very hard for you to go back and prove that. You can remember, oh, well, we discussed it at this meeting that we were going to make a change in this area, but nobody ever documented it. So it's kind of, you just got to take my word for it, right? But if you're maintaining and retaining and documenting those minutes, if you're taking appropriate meeting notes, you will always have the ability to go back and say, this is exactly what we talked about at this meeting, and this is why we did what we did. And again, our agendas and minutes should really be informing any sort of risks, issues, and changes of the project, any sort of schedule modifications. And then, of course, you could even use those agendas to review a status report. We like to touch on this. I'm going to go very quickly through this because this is definitely a longer slide. But basically, we like to just give some tips on meeting etiquette. For example, if you are going to be expected to be providing progress on a project, I'm working on a project. I'm not leading it, but I'm working on it. And I know at this meeting, I'm going to be asked, to give that progress update. Make sure if the project managers reached out beforehand that you've communicated with them, you've worked with them to give them that information, because in meetings, when the light shines, and especially if we're using our schedules the way we should do, it's going to be very clear who's behind on their tasks. So it's important to make sure that you're communicating with your project managers, and you're almost, to the sense, not allowing them to be babysitters where they're poking you all day, every day, like, hey, I need this update. Hey, I need this update. Make sure we're just keeping that line of communication. We're giving the project leaders the information that they need in an appropriate amount of time. We got to look for solutions. It's okay that there's going to be risks on the project. It's okay that problems pop up, but nobody wants to be on that meeting where we're just talking about how, we're sunk, we're not going to make the deadline. This is, the sky is falling. Don't do that. Let's look for the solutions. We're going to run into problems, but we also collectively as a team can look at those problems and together figure out how to address them. So we really must be solution oriented. Participate, even if this means just listening fully. We've all been on those calls where you ask like, hey, Nicole, can you give an update on this? And it's radio silence. And then, after a couple seconds, I ask again, and then you see Nicole come off mute. You hear like the click clacking of the keyboard, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Can you repeat that on a meeting is typically, I wasn't paying attention. So it's really important to participate, even if you're just listening fully. And then lastly, engage in efficiency. I understand that Outlook, defaults our meetings on our calendar in 30 and 60-minute blocks. But if we can accomplish a meeting in 15 minutes, accomplish the meeting in 15 minutes. There isn't any reason that we have to have an hour meeting on if something can get done in 15 or 20 minutes. So we highly, highly recommend engaging in efficiency. 15-minute meetings can be your friend. Lastly, just, kind of our methodology, our mindset here is to be happy, helpful, humble, and honest. And what we mean here is be happy in the sense that, specifically, for us coming from the UC system, be happy knowing that we work for a phenomenal company. Take pride in what we do. We don't have to always be happy all day, every day. We're human beings. We go through stuff, but, take that pride in your work to know that you work for a great company. Be helpful. We're a team. Again, we're going to run into things. We're going to hit roadblocks. So let's help each other. Let's help each other out. If we work together, we're going to be able to get past things. Be humble. No one likes to be on that meeting where one person chimes in and tells everybody else in that meeting that they're wrong all the time. Be humble. I don't know everything. I've been in this field a very long time, and I 100% can acknowledge that I don't know everything about project management. We're still, as human beings, we're always learning. Don't be the person that is the know-it-all. And then be honest, of course. We can't resolve things. I know I say this a lot. There's a reason I could keep saying this, is because we can't get past things if we don't know about it. So if you see something, if you know something's gonna kind of go awry on a project, bring it up. Be honest about it. It's an example of our meeting agendas and minutes that we like to send out. It's very important we send these things out in advance too. So ideally, it would be sent out 24 hours in advance, giving everyone on the meeting appropriate amount of time to prepare for it. Obviously, we know that's not always realistic, but we also don't want these agendas to go out 2 minutes before the meeting starts. And give your participants some time to absorb what is going to be talked about at that meeting. Risk and issue management is huge for project managers. And this is a slide where we talk about our evolution of a problem, an evolution of a problem. A risk is something that hasn't happened yet. It could happen, it could impact our scope, schedule, or budget, but it hasn't happened yet. It has not actually impacted or affected our project. An issue is where that takes it one step further. It is no longer this could happen, and it has happened. It is whatever the situation was, it has now impacted our scope, schedule, budget, and or quality. Meaning we have to make a change. We have to fix something on the project to kind of get us back on track. And that's where our changes come in. Those are the solutions. The solutions to our problems are a change. And it has to be accounted for though and approved. So an example could be that, say a resource that's working on your project was disgruntled, they weren't happy. That's a risk. We know this person's not happy. No, we didn't say anything. We didn't do anything about it. They have now left. They've quit. Now we don't have a resource that was working on the project where we needed them to. So a change could be that we go to our leadership and say, hey, can we bring in a contractor? Can we contract outside the organization to bring somebody in to fill in the gap that was put in place when this person quit? So that's a very quick example of how a risk became an issue, and then we needed a change to resolve that issue. But we also needed to get our approval from our leadership in order to put in place that change. All right. For project managers, it is our responsibility to make sure that we're being accurate and transparent about our risks and issues. One thing that I know project managers are often wary about is, well, if I bring this up, am I going to get my wrist slapped? Am I going to get punished for it? And what we preach when it comes to project management is you are the messenger. And unfortunately, sometimes, you do bear the brunt of a reaction from someone. But at the end of the day, it's your job to be transparent and honest about those risks and issues. You have to bring it up. That's your job. Because proper risk and issue management is protecting yourself and the team and our organization from bigger problems. If I knew that something could happen on our project that could shut the health system down, for example, or shut down Epic, like our electronic medical record system. If I don't say something, that system could go down. Therefore, our patient care would severely be impacted. And I don't bring that up, and then it actually happens. That's a problem. The light will surely shine on the project team that we didn't say anything about something that just brought down a health system. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but that illustrates the point that we need to speak up. We need to say these things, because the goal isn't to punish. The goal isn't to say, hey, you're not doing your job. The goal is to identify things that could happen, identify problems, and then collectively as a team work to resolve them. Real quick from an escalation pathway, this is just showing that you have different ways to resolve or to escalate certain items. We can escalate within the project team. If we identify something, but we know we can resolve it as a project team, we still have to document it, but it stops there. It doesn't go any further. Our project leaders, that could be, the project manager or that project manager's, escalation point. Maybe we need to add additional contingency into the schedule, but the project manager knew that we had a little bit of buffer on the schedule. So we're not going to escalate any further, but we're going to document it, but it stops right there. Project leader handled it. We're good. If that doesn't work, maybe we need to go a step further. I have a team where I can't get the resource to attend meetings. And this goes back to our art and science. I've reached out, I've tried to use my gut, I've tried to use my intuition, my customer service, but they're just non-responsive. I've done everything I can do as a project leader. I can't get through. So I need to escalate to my leadership to hopefully maybe them talk to this in particular, this team. And then lastly, use your governance committees. If you're stuck and you need help, there are so many different executive governance committees in most organizations that you have an escalation path. Now, obviously, you want to make sure you've gone through the other paths first before you bring it to one of those committees. But that's why they're there. That's why that governance is there, to help us remove those barriers, help us to solve those problems. So we know we're done. We know we're done with execution, monitoring, and controlling when all of our objectives that we set out to do on that project are complete. We have accomplished what was in scope. We've gone live. Go lives are different than closing a project and completing. A go live is the first day that something is actually out in the environment. The first day that we turned on those patient pressure ulcer sensors. That's a go live. We didn't close it yet, but we went live with it. Operations, or whoever is going to pick this up after, they're ready to take the reins on this. This is important because we often neglect this step. Or, if it's not us taking the reins after the project, we don't necessarily make sure a lot of times that the teams that are taking the maintenance of this are in the loop. We need to make sure they're ready to take that. We're going to go live. They need to be ready to do it. And then lastly, make sure that, your leaders, your customers, they've accepted what we set out to do. This is what we said in the beginning. This is what we got sign off on, and this is what we actually accomplished. And then lastly, we can close. And I will make the time, I promise. So in closing, we'd really talk about lessons learned. And what lessons learned in a nutshell are is exactly that. What did we learn throughout this project? We should be collecting them throughout the entire project, but it's important to make sure that once you're ready to close, that we hold a formal lessons learned meeting within 4 weeks of that the execution phase. So, we've gone live. Within 4 weeks, we need to make sure we bring the whole team together to facilitate this formal lessons learned. And we can produce a couple different outcomes here. It could be, recognition. Hey, this went really well. This went really well. Like, we should do this more. Or it could be, maybe this didn't work as well as we thought it was going to work. Again, we should be collecting that and using our other logs like risks and issues throughout the process to make sure we're capturing these things. But the formal actual meeting should occur within 4 weeks of that third and fourth phase. We should be archiving this at the close. And this is important because if you are a project manager and you're trying to lead your next project, you can use someone else's lessons learned log to say, hey, this is what they took away from a previous project. I can use this. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I can use some of these tactics that looked like they worked well. And then also, this didn't work well for them. I'm definitely going to make sure I don't do that in my new project. So we know we can close when we have gathered our lessons learned. We've done that formal meeting. We've gathered them all up. The artifacts that we've kept throughout the project are archived. We've stored them away. They can be accessed by our project team. They can be accessed by our stakeholders, other project managers. And I save this for the last because it's really important to make sure that you acknowledge and celebrate your team. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to do that now with COVID, obviously, but it's important to at least send a note, send an email. Hey, really appreciate the work you did on the project. That stuff goes a really long way. In a post-COVID world, we can go have a happy hour together. Everybody loves that. It's fun. But the little things like just sending a note or a Teams message, hey, really appreciated all that work you did on the project. You knocked it out of the park. It goes a really long way. Your team really appreciates it. And then you can officially close out your project. So this is what you should know at the end of Project Management Lite, our 5.5 phases. And again, if this is an interesting training kind of outline for you all, we do hold a more in-depth training where we go a little bit more into details and a little bit more into the weeds. We do these virtually now. They are accessible if you are in the UC system or UCSD. They are in the UC Learning Center where you'd be able to go and check those out. But that is the training. That is Project Management Lite.
Thank you guys so much. So that brings our session to a close. We hope you enjoyed today's session, and a huge round of thanks to Zach and Nicole for presenting today. And in the link, or Joyce posted a link to BCOP and the community in the chat. And as Zach said, they do have this in an extended fashion if anybody is interested and available. So go ahead and contact us and we can point you in that direction. So we hope you have a great rest of the day and a great rest of your week. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was really great.